Hello, I'm Barry Aycock, your host, and today we're spotlighting Rick McCord's book, How to Succeed in the Agricultural Aerial Aviation Business. Rick's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for 30 years. And Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry.
Rick, we really like to document the history of Southeast Missouri here, and we like to do a lot of book reviews on local authors. This wasn't on your bucket list when we first met, being an author of a book.
No.
So what made you decide to be a book writer?
Well, you know, I've been doing this, I've been flying for 47 years, been an ag pilot for 38 years, and a lot of guys like me are retiring or getting close to retirement. And I've seen a lot of young people coming on board to want to become an ag pilot, and I thought, I just need to write some things down and show them the good and the bad and the ugly of being a crop duster. You know, and I put in some of my personal experiences and things that's happened and over the 38 years and how to avoid them, not make the same mistakes I've made.
Well, let's talk about the book, Rick. I read this book about 2 months ago. It took me about an hour to read. It's a very short read, which is a perfect book for me.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of insights to becoming an ag pilot, and I just want to go through a few. Let's start with chapter 1. Is being an ag pilot for me?
Right, you know, and so that's a big question. And back when my father was alive, and he helped me get my pilot's license to fly him and his business crew around the country. You know, I sought an interest of being an ag pilot then, and he would have said, no way. You know, no, you're not going to be one of these crazy.
It's like you're crazy.
Crazy cowboys in the sky. No, you're not going to. So I had to wait for him to pass on and go to heaven before I could pursue my goal. So that's just a friend of mine, Kenny Carlisle, allowed me to, he lost his pilot due to health reasons, and that allowed me to get my first seat. And
How many acres do you think you've flown in the United States? Because it's not just Missouri. I remember you've been to Iowa a few times and some other states,
right,
Kentucky. Right,
and I did a stint in Waco. I got my single engine air tanker certificate 1 year to do fire bombing. And I did that for a season, and then I've been to Australia to visit with some ag pilots. But I mean, this year alone, I've done 110,000 acres this summer alone.
Yeah, and you're semi-retired. You give retirement a bad name.
Yeah. So millions of acres. I mean, I'm done literally on millions and millions of acres.
So Rick, a new ag pilot that wants to get in to be a crop duster, what's that mentality?
Well, you gotta have a lot of money, because it takes a lot of money nowadays to get your commercial pilot's license, which is what you got to have. And then, of course, you have to pass, you know, get to your commercial applicator's certificate with USDA. And so, and it just, I don't know, it just, you know, people look at me, and I've heard them say so many times, you've got a job that I just dream of. Well, it is for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the summer. Then, after you're sitting in an airplane for 10, 12 hours a day, you've really got to have some stamina to be able to do that. You know how it is to drive for 5 or 6 hours and how bad you feel after a 5 or 6 hour, 8 hour drive. Well, an airplane is nothing to fly from daylight till dark, 12, 13 hours a day during the summer. So you just got to have a lot of stamina and a lot of rapid eye movement, checking out the wires and the trees and the things that you might hit. So.
And Rick, that's a good point, because you've done more than just crop dusting. I remember you carried the mail for the U.S. Postal Service, like to Paducah, to Nashville.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have as quick a reflex doing that type of job as you do crop dusting. So talk to us about the physical strain, the stamina you mentioned, and just, you know, a 75-year-old person doesn't have the reflexes to be an ag pilot.
Right, you know, and I talk about, well, we got drones that's coming on now, you know, and they talk about how they can do 40 acres in an hour. And then I say, well, I can do 40 acres in 7 minutes. And you know, so you're pulling so many G's, you know, in every turn, trying to get back into the field, because if your money handle on it, it's not down, your chemical's not coming out, you're not making no money. So the turns are, in the crop duster's sense, is a waste of time. So we're trying to get out of the field and get back in as quick as we can. So we're just like straight up and then straight back down, and you know, sadly, that's how some lose their life. There's a young man not far from here, just 22 years old, about 3 months ago, lost his life, Chris Gargans.
And that's about you lose one or two each year.
Oh, we've
Is
lost
that
a
right?
dozen this year. We lose a dozen or more every year.
And how much of that, Rick, is human error, or is it mechanical error?
Most all of it's human error. Occasionally it's mechanical error. There's a young man in California just a few weeks ago, and he was spraying sulfur dust on tomatoes as an insecticide, and his engine just failed. There wasn't nothing he did wrong. His engine just quit, and he went in and got some burns, but what killed him was he inhaled so much sulfur dust that just destroyed his lungs.
Well, Rick, let's go to chapter 2, planes, trains, and automobiles. Give us a kind of a synopsis of that chapter 2.
You know, I was trying to think of a funny title to kind of represent all the different kinds of agricultural airplanes there are, you know, and I started off in what's called a Cessna Ag Truck, and then there's the Air Tractor, and you know, and so they're all, you know, a lot of them are the Ag Cat, and it was named after the World War II Bearcat, you know, so I just tried to come up with a chapter title that I could represent different types of planes and whatnot.
Well, the coolest one you've always talked about to me is, I mean, y'all got cool names for them, like the Dromedary,
Yeah,
the Tail Draggers.
yeah,
They sound really macho, the Dromedary does. But
Yeah.
Chapter 3 talks about GPS systems, but not only talk about the GPS systems, but talk about how crop dusting aerial application has evolved since you first started
oh
until
my
today.
goodness. Back when I first started, they would use flaggers. So people would actually walk across the field,
And you sprayed them.
and hopefully not. I'd try to make them walk upwind, so the chemicals would be going away from them, and that was always the go. Sometimes if they didn't get out of the way quick enough, yeah, they might get sprayed. And then there was a device that was mounted on our wing that had a piece of cardboard and about a 6-foot piece of toilet paper connected to the cardboard. And when you left your end of the field, you pushed a button that would kick it out, and it would float to the ground. And you were just hoping that the wind didn't take it away from where you just went. So that was a way to mark.
Another use for toilet paper.
Yeah, and so then the GPSs came out, satellites, you know, and the very first one that came out, a friend of mine from Kiwani had one, and he had to go out and put up like 3 towers in each field to get signals off of those towers so he could fly the GPS, and that was like the first GPS systems. And then they came out where we were working off of Coast Guard signals, and they did come out with a subscription you had to pay each year. Now it's free. The government all gives it everybody for free. And back when the GPSs first came out, you could put a basic GPS in an airplane for around $3,000 to $5,000. Today, the ones like I'm running right now are like $35,000 to $37,000. So they went up a lot in cost, but they have a flow control built into them. So no matter if I'm going 170 mile an hour down with a tailwind or 150 back into the wind, the GPS coordinates everything and keeps the flow control exact same amount of gallons going downwind as I'm going upwind. So it's gotten really technical.
So, Rick, how much does a new plane cost nowadays for crop dusting?
They're the ones that I'm flying right now, and it's in this photo right here, is about $2.4 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reese, you said it takes a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Rick, one thing that always is on your mind every day that you're an ag pilot is the weather.
Yeah.
Whether or not to go up in the air that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And one particular story in my book, it was a foggy day, and we kept waiting for the fog to rise, and kept waiting, and finally I thought I can see 3/4 mile down my runway. I got enough I can take off. So, and I'm in an old airplane at this time, nothing like this advanced, and it didn't have what's called an artificial horizon in the dash. In other words, if you got in the clouds, you were in trouble because you couldn't tell whether your wings were level or not. And so I take off down the runway, and I no more getting air, and I'm in the fog. And so I turn to my left, and I'm just staying just right above the beans, and I'm trying to think what's ahead of me, where's the next tree line, where's the next telephone poles, and my mind is just racing. And finally I thought, I got to try to get on top. So I just went full power and just pulled the stick back in my lap, and everything just went white. And that's just a horrible scenario to be in and not have an artificial airplane to look at and tell you whether your wings are level or not. And for about 30, 40 seconds, seemed like 2 or 3 minutes, I finally popped out on top, and I was already in about a 30-degree bank and didn't know it.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's planes that's actually spun into the ground if they lose their artificial horizon. in the weather, thinking that they're in level flight.
Thank God for technology.
Yeah, yeah.
So Rick, most people that own their business, be it being the owner of you're the ag pilot or you own the flying business, we're all greedy. We're all trying to make money. We own our own business. We got bills to pay. So I'm sure the weather plays a big part, but you always have to push the limits. Sometimes ag pilots don't make the right decision because they got to get over this amount of acres. But they should always be thinking safety first. In Chapter 5, you talked about safety first, but they also have this line of acres to get over. So there's a happy medium there, right?
Right. You know, the farmers are always under the gun. If they're getting insect pressure, you know, you got to go, you got to go, got to go. And so a lot of times us as ag pilots will push that limit outside that envelope of safety. And, you know, and it's just that's when problems occur. You know, I actually tore up an airplane in, I think it was 98, and you remember right where it was at. But that was all pilot error, every bit it was. And that was just because I was pushing myself.
Is that over on James Stewart's airstrip at Parma?
Uh-huh.
You were too heavily loaded, right?
Right. And James, before I went, I called James to see if I could use the strip. And he said, yeah, but the grass is high and I haven't mowed it yet. And I said, well, I'm gonna come in there and try it. And so I landed and the grass was a little bit high, but it wasn't too bad. And I told my load crew, I said, just give me a half a load because I don't know how I'm gonna get out of here with just a full load yet. And I was working on my truck while they were loading me, and I looked around the side of the truck and there was fertilizer coming out the top of the airplane. So they fully loaded me. So it was either dump it on the ground on James's strip, which would have killed the grass, and I didn't want to do that, or try to dip it out the top with 5-gallon buckets and didn't have that. So I thought, well, I'm gonna try it. And got about halfway, 2/3 way down the runway, looking at a highway, power lines, big ditch, and I barely had my tail in the air, and pulling the stick back, trying to get the airplane in the air, and it just wasn't wanting to fly. And next thing I knew, I'd stomped on the brakes to try to get stopped, and the airplane just flipped end over upside down. Cartwheel.
I remember seeing you right after you get out of the plane. You're lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
But you didn't know where you're at, and you're a little shook up. But
Yeah.
I remember that day like it was yesterday, just south of Parma.
Yeah.
And you were headed into 153 highway.
Yeah.
Right into the highline wires.
Yeah. Only thing I ended up with was, because I had a shoulder harness on, had bruises on my chest, along my chest from going forward. And I learned a valuable lesson. If you're hanging upside down, put your hands above your head before you release that seatbelt, because I didn't do that and about broke my neck, falling to the top of the cockpit.
They call that a pile driver.
Yeah.
So Rick, starting ag pilot, is there any organizations you talk about, like in Chapter 6, the FAA, National and State Associations, and the USDA, to help a young beginning ag pilot start out?
Yes, there's always the National Ag Aviation Association, and it's always it's always in a big city like Reno. It's been in Charleston. They move it around to different places. It's going to be in I forget where it's going to be. It's in December, and that's where every new wannabe pilot needs to go, because there's always pilots there looking for pilots, or operators looking for pilots, and they've got training sessions and meetings and just things to learn, and it's a big help. NAAA is a big help to our industry, and every state has a state association. So Missouri has the MAAA, and so we have meetings, and we'll have 3 days of safety meetings with different ones, and the FAA will come in and talk and stuff like that. Right after 9/11, we had the FBI come in and talk to us.
Yeah, they thought everybody was putting fertilizer, going to start dropping bombs through crop dusters,
Well, I had the FBI and the Highway Patrol both come to my strip during those 3 weeks we were down, and they wanted me to take my prop off my airplane. And I said, why? Because it's got to be where it can't fly. I said, I have a hangar. Can you lock it up? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, okay. So, but they told me, they said, if you move your plane from this side of your concrete pad to that side, we're going to see it. So that meant they were watching, I guess, from satellites, everybody at those 3 weeks we were down.
That was a different time in history, wasn't it?
It sure was.
Scary time. Rick, how many ag pilots do we have, or people that own ag businesses in the state of Missouri?
Oh, There's probably 50 or so.
And some of those are ancestral, or they've handed them down to their kids. Like the
Yeah.
Blairs have a long history of being
Yeah.
ag pilots. The Adams down at Zenith, they're not in business now, but Charlie and Eddie Adams. I mean, there's a lot of heritage in the ag
That's
pilot
right.
sector.
That's right. And if you can't, I say, almost marry into one or be a part of that family that your dad handed it down to you, most operators want their, even if you're a commercial pilot, they want you to work on the ground for a couple of years just to learn the specifics of the airplane and loading and chemicals and all this sort of stuff. Almost all of them will want you to load at least for 2 years before they'll allow you to fly one of their airplanes.
When we talk about ag aviation, it's not only planes, it's also helicopters. Helicopters seem to be a newer trend in this area.
Yeah, and I don't really, for me, I still can't hardly understand. I mean, if it's some small, little bitty tiny fields where an airplane can't get, I can see where a helicopter is good. But a helicopter charges about twice as much as an airplane does, takes twice as long to do a field, and they can't put out as much water as an airplane can, you know, because they just can't carry a big load.
Well, the newest technology, Rick, a few people around have got these drones.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, and there's so many drone operators are so unaware of the regulations. They're just going out and buying these drones off the Amazon or wherever they're getting them, and just going out and trying to pick up a job. Well, they've right off the bat got to have their commercial pilot's license because they're doing a job for hire, and a lot of them don't even know that. But you know, I can see it coming eventually as the drones continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the batteries last longer. I stopped and met with some drone operators on one of my trips back home. He was out working on the highway, and I seen him, and I went back to talk to him, and the batteries only last 7 minutes. You know, so they was making one pass down there, was sowing clover in a pasture, and making one pass down and coming back, landing, put another battery in, going again. And just 7 minutes is all they last. But I know technology is coming to where the batteries are going to be made to where they're going to last longer and whatnot. So I think it's going to come.
Rick, I loved your book, but chapter 7, if God is your co-pilot, then you're sitting in the wrong seat. That was my favorite chapter. So tell us about how faith is involved in your decision making on your ag pilot experience,
right,
and just overall your faith in your career.
Well, can I tell you that? Can I tell the story about sharing that chapter?
Yes.
You know, back when I first started flying ag, I'd say, a backslidden Christian. You know, I got saved when I was young, but got married too young and to the wrong person, and just living a stupid life as a young person. But anyway, things changed. I changed my life, and I was working in an airplane that had no radios. My helmet didn't have any speakers in it, so I had.
Oh, you wore a helmet?
I did have a helmet. It may have been a motorcycle helmet, but I had a cheap helmet. Nowadays, the helmet I have now is like $3,000 because everything's just gotten more technical. But I had a really cheap helmet, didn't have no speakers in it, didn't have no radio in the airplane. I was going in and out of the New Mexico County Airport all day long, and I just quit looking for other airplanes because you might have one plane a day land there because it's a very small airport. And I heard my voice in my ears said, "Rick, there's a plane." And I looked out my right window, and there was a twin-engine airplane, and we were coming together. And he hadn't seen me, and I just saw him. And I just turned away and didn't think nothing about it for about 10 or 15 seconds. And I thought, I just heard my name. So I've told a lot of people, I said, when I get to heaven, my guardian angel's going to go, "I'm tired. I'm really glad you're here." Because I have had so many, I've flown through 3 power lines and then tore that one airplane up. Luckily, I made it through all 3 lines. Didn't do a whole lot of damage to the plane other than just made some ugly dents in the plane. But it's, I've been pretty fortunate, and I've always said that if God's your co-pilot, you're sitting in the wrong seat, because he should be our pilot.
Well, the Ag Aviators Association does a great job of supporting families of pilots that do crash, right? I've been a little bit involved myself,
Yeah.
but They actually take care of those families, I think,
They
after
really do.
that tragedy happens.
They really do. Right off the bat, the NAAA, National Ag Aviation Association, they'll put out a request, that this person just lost their life, and tell about how many kids they've got and a new wife. And most of them are young men, and got little kids. You very seldom hear someone my age unless it's just engine failure, because I've just become so evident. I'm always looking for a place to land. I mean, I've been doing this for 47 years, and if I'm flying back home, I'm looking at passengers going, yeah, I could land in that. Yeah, I could land there. I'm always looking for a place. And knock on wood, and luckily, I've never had an engine failure. I've had some engine trouble, which I got back to the airport, but I've never had an engine failure. So yeah, got to have faith.
So, Rick, will there be another book number 2?
Maybe. That's available right now on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and Walmart.com and Target.com. It's on Kindle. So my publisher has really done a good job of putting it out there. It's General Aviation News highlighted it in their newspaper last month. And so my publisher sent it out, my press release out to 1,000 different entities all over, even UK and Scotland, and KFVS 12's even got one of my press releases. And so,
well, you do a great job of melding your experiences in with just the roles of being an ag pilot.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've been doing it for a long time. I know the things that'll hurt you, and I know when to back off, because when you can carry a 700-acre load at 7 o'clock in the morning, you may not be able to carry that load at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when it's 30 degrees hotter. So the 3 H's, high heat and humidity, are the things that'll kill you. And you just got to know when to start backing off.
Well, Rick, thank you for sharing your insights on your book. It's not a new book now. I read it 2 or 3 months ago.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
You can get Rick's book on Amazon, and there's lots of good reviews on Amazon. I just looked at them last night, but Rick, you may be headed for an Amazon #1 bestseller.
I hope so.
Great job on the book, and thank you
you.
for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Rick McCord.
Thank you.